While this particular bike didn't set the world on fire, it was smooth, reliable, and had pretty good triple disc brakes. You see, back in 1980, most motorcycle manufacturers were hell-bent on producing motorcycles with high horsepower. And while the Yamaha XS850 didn't fit this mould and was only produced for 2 years, it was powerful enough. It featured a shaft final drive, and the engine was an air-cooled inline 3-cylinder 4-stroke. It was by no means the best performer of its time, but its engine produced 79 horsepower, which was substantially more power than its predecessor, the XS750. Its engine was built to deliver more torque at fewer revs, meaning the bike had good mid-range punch and pulling power, as opposed to having to rev the shit out of it like you had to with some other bikes of that era. While it may not have been the best performer of its time, with a top speed of 120 miles per hour and a quarter mile time of 13.3 seconds, it was still fast enough, and a very practical motorcycle. The 24-litre tank gave the XS850 a very useful range. Vibrations on the triple were not too much of a problem, although there was a buzz or tingle felt through the handlebars. Nobody else seemed to mind too much, although I do remember my hands going numb on long rides on my bike. The excessive oil consumption that bothered the XS750 triples since they were introduced was addressed by Yamaha with a new type of oil piston ring used on the 850. The 850 looked muscular and was a very beautiful motorcycle, but like many Japanese big bikes of the era, it was a bit top heavy, so it didn't feel that light by any means. And even though the handling was somewhat flexible, it was still a very good motorcycle, and I have very good memories of mine. Another extremely beautiful motorcycle, which wasn't that successful, was the Moto Guzzi 1000S. When it was introduced in 1990, its 2-valve 949cc V-twin engine was fairly unremarkable. Producing 81 horsepower at that time, it wasn't the most powerful, the fastest, nor the quickest accelerating bike of the era, but it was every bit as quick as the original Kawasaki Z1900, which in reality is a powerful enough bike for any rider with an average skill level to be able to handle. The 1000S Moto Guzzi looked absolutely classic, an excellent reproduction of Moto Guzzi's classic sports bike of the early 1970s, the 750S. And like all Guzzis, it's built extremely solid. I know this because I've owned 3 different models. They are the type of bike that you can own for many years, if not a lifetime. While it may get blown away in many performance comparisons, it is still a muscular looking bike, with just enough chrome to make it stand out without looking tacky. The bike came with either spoke or cast wheels, which were fitted with triple floating disc Brembo brakes. But sadly, this beautifully crafted and classic styled bike was a bit ahead of its time. Looking very much like a 1970s machine, the Moto Guzzi 1000S was a retro bike built well before most other manufacturers even realised the value of nostalgia, and well before retro bikes became popular.
down here on Highway 316. It's a giant Suzuki, and it's moving fast.
Next up, we have the Suzuki GSX 1100G, a super heavyweight naked bike with sports bike power. The engine was absolutely the standout feature on this Suzuki. Once you press the starter button, the bike purrs like a little kitten. But give it a handful and you are instantly aware that a beast of an engine lurks underneath you. The 1100cc engine produced 98 horsepower with 98 Newton meters of torque. It featured air and oil cooling, and a bonus for me was the fact that it had screw and lock nut valve adjusters, so you could do all the maintenance on the bike yourself at home. The 1100G is built for comfort, with suspension on the soft side and a very plush seat. Matter of fact, I would rate this motorcycle as having one of the most comfortable seats on any motorcycle that I've ever owned. You could easily spend a whole day riding it without discomfort. Its hydraulically operated clutch was very easy on the hand as well. An optional fairing, windscreen and saddlebags were available, making it a very good sport touring motorcycle. Although the bike is pretty heavy, the seat is reasonably low, making it a relatively easy bike to handle. While the bike may look pretty tame, it covered the quarter mile in 11.5 seconds, and with a top speed of 140 miles per hour, it certainly wasn't a bike for a novice rider. One thing I really liked about my 1100 was the very well spaced gear ratios. Although for my liking, the bike did seem to rev a tad too high at cruising speeds, making it pretty thirsty for fuel. But this meant you had all power available at any time. Just a twist of the throttle and you could very quickly pass anything on the road without the need to change down a gear. Although it was pretty thirsty for fuel, at least it had a 21 litre fuel tank, giving the bike a reasonably good fuel range. The Suzuki GSX 1100G was a tractable, practical, everyday motorcycle, and it really should have been much more popular than it was. Another bike, which didn't sell that well, was the Ducati ST3. Ducati's decision to cancel production of the ST3 was sadly more to do with the market changing than the ST3 itself. Adventure bikes were taking over the sports touring segment at the time, and everyone else wanted superbikes or street fighters, making the ST3 somewhat redundant. The Ducati ST range, which stands for Sport Turismo, started in 1997 with the liquid-cooled 944cc Ducati ST2. The 2 meaning the L-twin had 2 valves per cylinder. And in 1999, Ducati added the 916cc ST4 to the range, which had 4 valves per cylinder. Then in 2004, Ducati created a brand new 992cc motor, which replaced both the ST2 and the ST4. This new model was the ST3, which had 3 valves per cylinder, 1 very big exhaust valve and 2 smaller inlet valves. This unique design gave the ST3 the low-down torque of a 2-valve motor and the high-end performance of a 4-valve motor, while still keeping a very good mid-range. Although it was only around for a few years, it certainly didn't deserve such a short lifespan. The later model ST3s produced 107 horsepower in standard trim, with a huge 98 Newton meters of torque. and with a quarter mile time of 11 seconds, it was indeed a touring bike with the soul of a sports bike. Some owners install a smaller front sprocket to lower the gearing, which is fine of course, but the ST3 gearbox in reality is a 5-speed, with 5th being top gear. 6th gear is a significant overdrive, and it should be used as such, for faster highway use only to lower your engine revs. With a 21 litre fuel tank and the optional factory panniers, the ST3 is an ideal choice for a weekend tour. On the open road, the ergonomics are second to none, making for an ideal riding position to control your motorcycle. However, due to the weight on the wrists at slow speeds, it's not so good in the city. Its world-class brakes and absolutely superb handling make the ST3 a very safe motorcycle. The fairing works a treat, offering excellent protection from the elements, at least for someone my size, and its very powerful headlight offers very good illumination on the road at night. Like the GSX 1100G, the seat on the ST3 is also one of the most comfortable seats ever installed on any standard bike. Even today, its overall design still looks current. With all that glossy bright red paint, though also available in other colours, and that fantastic Ducati exhaust sound, the Ducati ST3 is a very hard motorcycle to ignore, and even though it didn't sell that well, in my honest opinion, the ST3 is one of the best overall performing motorcycles ever made. And yes, obviously I do have one parked in my garage.
Kawasaki lets the good times roll. Kawasaki lets the good times roll. Get aboard, get away, and you're gonna say, let the good times roll.
A few years back, actually quite a few years, but anyway, I had to leave one of my bikes at my local dealer for a week for a major service. I was lucky enough for them to offer me a loaner bike. This bike was a second-hand Kawasaki ZL1000. Initially, I didn't particularly like the look of the bike, but it was just a loaner, so I gratefully accepted their offer. The Eliminator, as they were called, had a 1000cc liquid-cooled inline 4-cylinder engine, which produced 110 horsepower. And with a quarter mile time of 11.5 seconds and a top speed of over 130 miles per hour, I reckon it would have been pretty much as fast as anything else on the road at that time. Having such a powerful engine on a bike, which didn't fold you into a cramped race replica riding position, proved surprisingly quite refreshing. The upright riding position was very relaxed, and it was excellent in the city. It didn't matter what gear you were in, roll-on acceleration was as good as any motorcycle I've ever ridden, and unlike most cruisers, it also had a decent-sized fuel tank of 18.5 litres, and it even had a low-maintenance shaft final drive. The Kawasaki ZL1000 Eliminator is a powerful 4-cylinder motorcycle that doesn't put you in an uncomfortable riding position, and even though the handling and performance may not quite be as sharp as a full-on sports bike, it was a brilliant motorcycle, very well balanced and easy to ride. However, they were only made for 1 year and sold for just 3 model years, with a total production number of only 2,500 motorcycles, so they are pretty rare, and finding one might prove difficult these days. Why the bike failed is beyond me. I can only assume that riders who wanted a really fast bike bought Ninjas, and riders who wanted a power cruiser bought Yamaha's brilliant VMAX. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. If so, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to check out the channel's other videos while you're at it. Cheers.